with the premiers of Nova Scotia and Saskatchewan. I'm Heather Fairbairn, and I'll be your moderator for today. We'll begin with some brief remarks from the Premier of Nova Scotia, and then we'll open the floor to questions. We'll take questions from the media in the room, and then we've got quite a long list participating virtually. And so with that, it's my pleasure to introduce the Honourable Scott Moe, Premier of Saskatchewan, and of course the Honourable Tim Houston, Premier of Nova Scotia. Take it away, Premier.
Thank you, Heather. Good afternoon, everyone. What a pleasure to host Premier Moe and his team here for the last couple of days. We've had some great discussions, and good things are happening in Saskatchewan for sure. So we've really had to enjoy our chats about a number of issues. I guess first I'll offer Premier Moe some opening comments. Welcome.
Yeah, I would say thank you, Premier Houston, and thank you for hosting all of the premiers, the Council of Federation here in Halifax. And thank you to the people of Halifax and the people of Nova Scotia for hosting us here. We had as I said, as we know, all of the premiers came and came to agreement and consensus on a number of different items, which isn't always easy considering the diversity of the great nation that we have. And credit to Premier Houston as chair of that committee throughout this year and chair of that meeting for bringing to light the points of consensus that we can find from coast to coast to coast in what is as I said, is a very diverse nation. It was a health summit, and very much the discussion we had was focused on health and sharing of best practices across our provincially administered health systems. Premier Houston talked of the health app that is going to be available very shortly, I understand, in Nova Scotia. We've been doing some parallel work in Saskatchewan, and it was good to compare and contrast the health records that our residents would be able to access both in Nova Scotia and Saskatchewan, and ultimately through the sharing of that type of information in other provinces as well. We picked up a few best practices that I think we're going to have a look at in linking some virtual care opportunities that Nova Scotia has been working on. To Premier Houston and the health authority here, and some of the physicians in the space also spoke of some of the robotic surgeries that are happening again. Just sharing some of those best practices and offering and I would say not only offering, but strengthening our national health care through our provincially delivered systems. We had good discussion on recruiting, of which Premier Houston and I had discussed a month or a month and a half ago, along with Premier Fury as well, as we had in various areas of the country, our health authorities, our recruitment teams were out and not only looking at attending job fairs at post-secondary institutes, but maybe in some cases going a little bit beyond that. And we've had an agreement to, yes, offer those opportunities across Canada to our graduates at various job fairs so that they're aware of the Canadian opportunity that they have. But when it comes to folks that are already offering services in our respective provincial jurisdictions to, let's ensure that we are respecting one another as a province, focusing on training, focusing on recruiting globally into our nation, and building not only strong provincial levels of care and methods of care, but together by each of us strengthening our provincial health care systems, we thereby are strengthening health care nationally. I want to speak just a little bit more about the diversity in the room and the diversity of our nation, whether it be on how we deliver healthcare. We talked about housing and some of the housing needs and how the housing challenges in various areas of the nation are different, and how some of the infrastructure challenges behind the housing builds are different, and how we need everyone at the table, all levels of government, the industry as well, and we require some flexibility with what is happening, whether it be some federal funding that's being provided in that space, and I understand today there were some announcements around that, but that does need to be flexible, and the province does need to be at the table in each of those spaces. And then largely, of course, the diversity in our relative economies. And how the federally imposed carbon tax is having an impact on each of those regional economies and ultimately on our Canadian economies. And the change in policy that we had saw just recently, and when it comes to a pause on the carbon tax with home heating fuel, which does impact some Canadians in certain regions of the country, but not all Canadians, and the call for that to be extended to all heating fuels across the nation. And I would say that the discussion at the table led by Premier Houston was that wherever you sit on the carbon tax policy, whether it's effective or not, and I think with the recent announcement at the federal level here, it's proving to be not, would be my opinion. But whether it's effective or not, largely outside of Quebec, that policy has been at least attempted to be provided fairly across the nation. No one can say that today. There's carve-out after carve-out being discussed at the federal level, and really at the end of the day, what we need to do is remove that consumption carbon tax that is causing inflation to Canadian families. And so we asked the federal government to be fair to Canadian families, to quit with the carve-outs in certain regions, in certain areas that are impacting some Canadians but not all, be fair to all Canadians, and to remove essentially the carbon tax from the consumption base and the inflationary pressures that Canadians are feeling. So whether it be in Saskatchewan or Nova Scotia or any of the other provinces or territories across Canada, we have had a vibrant discussion around the opportunities that we have to work together, the vibrant and growing and expanding economies that we have, the sustainable economies that we have, and the growing communities that we have in our respectable areas of the country. And so I just wanted to express my thanks to all those folks in Nova Scotia, but in particular your Premier Houston, for hosting all of the premiers and myself as well.
Thank you so much. And it was kind of refreshing, I guess, how quick the premiers agreed on a number of issues. Certainly the carbon tax and the need for it to be fair across the country. There was a very, very quick agreement on that. The challenges in housing are across the entire country as well. And I know right now we're in the legislature, and we have a couple pieces of legislation to deal with housing for sure around the relationship between the province and the municipalities, around funding to the municipalities, and I heard from a number of other premiers that they have similar. They're seeing similar challenges with in the municipal space. So we'll work together on some of that stuff. But definitely for us, I mean. The focus on healthcare has been front and center for us for 2 years, and we've made incredible strides. But learning from other premiers and other provinces and territories this was a great check-in point, and some of the things that are happening in Saskatchewan around surgical centers, around transparency, very very consistent with what we're doing, and we did release an app this week. We have another one that's not too far on the heels of it, that will be put more power in the patient's hands, and we've been able to learn from some of the other premiers and what's happening in their areas. So it's been a really good couple of days, and a great opportunity to check in and learn a little bit from most popular premier in the country.
I think I'm tied now.
Ready for questions?
Yeah. Premier, you and your colleagues talked about exploring a legislative framework similar to Quebec's when it comes to housing and deals between municipalities and Ottawa. How do you see that working in this province?
I guess what I would say, and then ask Premier Moe to follow on as well, is we're actually hoping it's not necessary, but. In Quebec, at some point in time, they saw it as necessary. They have a piece of legislation in Quebec that requires the federal government to, I'm going to say, deal fairly and honestly with the provincial government, and it's worked for Quebec. When you look at some of the outcomes that they've had on different policies, right? So right now we have a federal government that, in many ways, is acting like they believe in the divide and conquer approach to things. We see that with the carve-out around the carbon tax. We see that around some of the funding announcements that, we wake up in the morning as premier and hear there's a funding announcement in the province with the federal government. So we just need to make sure that the relationship is fair and honest. And in terms of housing funding, in this province right here, there's not many projects that a municipality would advance, even in conjunction with the federal government, that the province is not going to be a partner. So let's accept that. Let's acknowledge that up front, and let's have the province at the table to begin with. So we're hoping that the federal government just sees that is common sense and is fair and does it. But if not, the premiers all spoke about the willingness to adopt legislation that's similar to what Quebec has that requires the federal government to deal fairly with the provinces and the municipalities at the same time where it's appropriate.
My read on the Quebec law is that they have to seek prior approval from the Minister of Finance in Quebec before they can sign a deal. I'm wondering, how would that speed up? Because the end goal is to make sure that we have enough housing and that it's sped up. How would a municipality seeking prior approval from your government or others that will follow speed up that process?
Just get all the people at the table to begin with, as opposed to, two parts, in this example, the federal government and the municipalities striking a deal and knowing full well that the province is going to have to be involved and then coming to them afterwards. Let's just do it up front. And, look, in right here, it wasn't that long ago where we had a municipality who was going to turn away federal housing money. Remember in Cape Breton last year, they said, well, we don't know what to do with this money. So let's try to nip those things off. I think it is quicker when you involve people right up front, and we're hopeful that the federal government sees that and understands that. But if they don't, I think you'd see a move across the country to legislate it.
Do you see the province getting a veto if the feds want to give a bunch of money to HRM for housing? You see the province getting a veto over that?
I think it's respectful to the municipalities as well, right? We have a diverse group of municipalities, and some of the federal program is can be complicated. A lot of processes, duplicate processes that they're trying to focus on governing their municipality. So we're there to help the municipalities with to make sure that they're understanding the opportunities, different programs that are available, making sure that we can provide the expertise that the province has to help them get the applications in. And I think that there's people are all on the same page, particularly on housing. Everybody wants more housing, safer housing, more affordable housing. So I think just if we have all of the parties at the table, we can have a real discussion about what's possible. And not everything's possible for every municipality.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Scott.
You look like you wanted to-
I would just add to that as well. By having everyone at the table very early in whatever that discussion is, there's various regulatory bodies at municipal, provincial, and federal levels, and there's various ideas about how can we enhance, accelerate developments, housing developments, whether they be multifamily, rental, whatever that might be. But by having everyone at the table very early in that process, ultimately, if there are any synergies to be had, you're going to find them right away. And that is the goal. Everyone has the same outcome that they're focused on is to deliver more housing to the residents of Canada wherever they live. The challenges behind why that might be needed are somewhat different in different areas of Canada. In Toronto and Vancouver might be different than the next level or tier of cities. We have. And not just us, British Columbia and a few other provinces have voiced this as well. We have a challenge that, although isn't unique, most certainly isn't discussed in the housing conversation. It's one that is largely federal in responsibility, but I think, in fairness, provinces are very active in it. And it's the chronic years of underfunding, not just by this government, by previous governments, of housing for federal residents in Indigenous communities, and that is creating pressures in adjacent, in Saskatchewan's case, northern and Métis communities, and creating pressures also in our urban centres as well. And so, that's just one example of where the province is already building in those adjacent communities, but we might be able to create some synergies by having that discussion with the federal government right up front when an investment might come. That's very different from the national discussion around what's needed in the housing space, or very different from a Vancouver or Toronto, or maybe even a Halifax or Nova Scotia discussion. But it's one example of the diversity. It's one example of why we should have everyone at the table, the industry, federal government, municipal government, as well as the provinces. And I think there's a shared concern that there is a federal government that is increasingly looking at the potential political benefits, for lack of a better term, of circumventing the provinces and landing in a Toronto or Vancouver and dropping a housing program strictly for political gain. And so that was the concern. And I would say that it's a real concern, and it definitely misses out on some of the synergies that may actually address the root challenges that we're dealing with that are different from coast to coast to coast.
Go ahead.
I was going to, are Nova Scotia and other provinces actively working to phase out travel nurse job opportunities?
Yeah, it was certainly a discussion with the premier's meetings and a lot of talk around just the healthcare human resource issue in general, the need for more healthcare professionals across the country and certainly here in Nova Scotia. So the recruitment, the training, the retention, all of those elements were a discussion, and every province is trying to deal with the issue of travel nurses and locums to some extent as well. So there was an agreement at the premier's table to revisit that issue on what might be possible around potentially capping the fees in some way, shape, or form that we would pay to travel nurses. We certainly understand that people have the right to be mobile and work wherever they want in this country, and there's incredible opportunities in every corner of this country, and we want that as well. But we know that in the healthcare system on the front lines, when you have somebody who's being paid a different amount than somebody who's there day in and day out, like the travel nurses tend to be, it can cause some friction on the floor. So it's something that every jurisdiction is dealing with, and there was, I would say, agreement at the premier's table to see if we can find a way to mitigate the risk and stress that's causing financially and emotionally.
When it comes to the issue of poaching, might there be some kind of formalized accord that you could work out? It's one thing to say that you won't do it, but is there any kind of a move afoot to try to get it down formally on paper so that you actually do work together?
Yeah, well, there was agreement around the table to not do it yesterday, and that may grow into a formal accord. I'll leave that to the chair to put on the agenda of a subsequent meeting. But there certainly was agreement around the table, and I had no concerns coming out of the meeting that it wouldn't be that way, at least while these faces are around the table. So it's a good question, and it might be a next step.
The $80 million that the HRM recently got from Ottawa, were you completely blindsided by that announcement?
The minister might have been involved in discussions, and I may have been aware of some discussions, but it wouldn't be fair to say it was a complete surprise. But I think what we're trying to focus on is just making sure that all those funding partners are part of it, because as Premier Moe said, we can bring something to the table too in terms of synergies. So that to not have everyone at the table, you potentially miss an opportunity, and there's no time for missing opportunities on the housing file or other challenges.
Is there a missed opportunity in this particular specific case? Are you coming to the table with money?
Who's to say? We'll look at it, and the housing minister will speak more fulsomely about that. But going forward, and HRM is one example. But our municipalities across the province are various sizes, have various challenges around the infrastructure that might be required. Some have challenges around just actual land. In which case maybe the province has land. We've been working with municipalities on seeing if we can make some crown provincial land available for housing developments, but they still need sewer and water. So, look, it's just the only, I guess, the message that I would want to send to the federal government is just we all have the same objective. So let's all work together on this, and the province will be there, where we can, to support opportunities for Nova Scotians.
We have a number of outlets participating virtually, so we're going to take some time to check in with them. We'll do one question, one follow-up. I'll start with 980 CJME, Lisa Schick. Go ahead, Lisa. Can you hear me, Lisa?
Yeah, sorry, just unmuting myself there.
Awesome.
Premier Moe, when it comes to housing, I guess, and wanting the provincial government to be involved when the federal government is, I just wanted to ask about that because, I mean, recently in the last couple of years, there has been one or two projects that the provincial government hasn't wanted to be involved in. I'm thinking specifically of a second stage housing from Avana. So if this were to go ahead, would that mean that you would have to be brought in, or the provincial government would have to be interested in a project for it to get federal money?
Well, again, I would echo what Premier Houston had said as a chair of COF, that we would hope it isn't that isn't the point where it would get to. And second stage housing, an important investment, one that you would know, Lisa, that we now invest not only in operations in that space, but are investing in capital as well, with the most recent addition of a project in Prince Albert and Regina, bringing our investment, I believe, up to 7 capital projects in that space. An important service and an important level of housing to have. The broader conversation is around the expansion of our communities to address some of the homelessness challenges that we have. So the expansion of assisted living housing that we had Premier Makowski had announced alongside the 2 health ministers in our mental health and addictions update, and the Mayor Clark and Mayor Masters from our 2 largest centers, I think would point to well in excess of 100 assisted living spaces that will add to our inventory that we have today for often young families to use that need a hand up for a period of time. But even larger than that is broader to the housing file across the province, and not only in our larger cities. And so that includes some of our Sask housing stock, trying to assess as to what's the best use of the stock that we have there. Can we work with the federal government, for example, with some of the announcements that they had today, or can we work with municipalities and even the construction industry itself in various programs to get those houses into the hands of people that ultimately need a home, and most particularly those with a young family. Some of the construction projects that we had that alludes to an earlier answer I had about some of the underfunding, chronic traditional underfunding in our Indigenous communities, and then some of the pressures that will arrive in adjacent communities that we have invested in as a province. I'm thinking of a number of different northern communities where we've had tiny home projects with local infrastructure companies and the municipality, Laloche, Pine House, and many others. And so there's the housing file is very broad. And some of it is involved with some of the wraparound supports that may arrive with it. And I think that's important, that just the breadth and diversity of that file in a community to begin with, in a province secondarily, and across the nation. It's very, very important, I think we can see, to have all of the players at the table providing their input, so that if there are synergies, we find them. And if there are challenges, we find a way to work through those. And so it's about engagement. And respect, I think, for the diversity of our nation, and really using that diversity as a strength as opposed to a point of division.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I get what you're saying there, but what happens if and when there is a project that somebody like a municipality wants, that the federal government's interested in putting money into, that the provincial government isn't really interested in? Because you seem to be saying that you want that federal money to kind of flow through the province.
Well, there may not be an opportunity for a provincial government to add to a federal initiative. In the same voice, and Premier Houston might have something to add to this, there may be a provincial initiative where the federal government isn't choosing to participate as well. And we've seen much of that in many northern Saskatchewan communities, for example, under the instance that I just provided. So it doesn't mean that we're always going to move forward together, but it does mean when we can move forward together and capture some of those synergies, it only makes sense, and it really is the way that I would say that we're most successful in communities across provinces across this nation. But anything to add to that?
No, this is the discussion at the Premier's table was absolutely not a discussion about let's look for ways to limit housing. It was a discussion about let's look for ways to increase opportunities for housing, and that's the spirit in which that discussion was approached. And collectively as a group of premiers, we feel that there are lots of times where the provincial government can add to a discussion that's taking place, and we don't want to miss those opportunities. So I'd kind of turn it around and say we're looking for the positive outcomes, as opposed to looking for opportunities to limit growth. We want growth in our provinces. We need housing in our provinces. We want to partner with the federal government. We want to work with the municipalities, and we just want to do that together.
Next, we'll go to CTV Saskatoon and Josh Lynn. Go ahead, Josh, with your first question. Josh? Moving along, we'll go to the Globe and Mail, Lindsay Jones. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Hi there. I wanted to bring up the idea that the provinces have been cut out when it comes to recent funding and dealing directly with municipalities. Is there like what if the money came quicker by the federal government just dealing directly with the municipalities? Why does we often hear about when money not coming quickly enough from the federal government? Would this just be one more step that prolongs the money flowing in for housing and infrastructure?
Look, that's certainly not the intent, and I doubt it would be the outcome, to be honest. But so I think what is more likely to happen if the province is not involved up front in the discussions to look for ways that we can add to what's possible or to identify challenges, as Premier Moe said. But what's the more likely scenario is that the province is brought in later on. And that's a delay. So look, the only thing we're just saying is, look, as we go forward, as the federal government comes out with new programs, as the federal government restocks some existing programs, we just want to make sure that they know that the province is a willing partner in that they can reach out to, and they should do that sooner, not later. And then that's the spirit of it. And then I guess the other part of it is like we want to be there at the table, and if you're coming into a province with projects, then we just we'll ask, I guess, to be involved. But if that's not working, then we'll legislate that we need to be involved, because we're going to be involved eventually anyway. It's very rare that the province would not be involved. So to bring the province in after the fact, that's the risk. That's the slowdown risk right there.
Lindsay, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. You mentioned, waking up in the morning and just learning about a federal initiative coming into the province. Can you explain, when that happened? When was that, and what was the announcement?
GST on rental properties, on the construction of rental properties. I don't know if Premier Houston, if you had a heads up that was coming by any stretch. We most certainly didn't. We welcome it, by the way, and have made some attempts to actually augment, some of that new construction space in our province. We very quickly did some assessments on, where the challenges are, and is there, what can the province do to augment the removal of GST on rental multifamily rental dwellings. And what we found was that affordable home ownership in the province was becoming increasingly challenged. There was, albeit some challenges in the rental space. The larger challenge was to actually access affordable home ownership. And so we had augmented that program with a provincial program, a PST rebate on affordable homes. I believe it was at 550,000 or less, or 500,000 and less construction costs on your home, as well as moving into that rental space a bit with a grant on a secondary suite in your home. As you know, many folks will have a secondary suite in their basement or in one of the levels of their home, and so we were able to augment that program. However, we had no heads up or conversations around that program coming, and so we got there. I would say slower than maybe we would have gotten there had we had that initial conversation, maybe with some of the major municipalities in Saskatchewan, the minister in Saskatchewan, and the federal government. And so, again, I think a point of us trying to work together to the best that we can, not slowing down any of the decisions that are being made at any level in enhancing the delivery of housing to Canadian residents collectively, but what's the harm in sitting down and discussing our directional intentions prior to that?
I think that's a good example, and we worked quickly too as to join on that, but we obviously early on identified some kind of unintended consequences and potential gaps, and it's still an ongoing discussion that is raised with me. Is that it's on new constructions. So somebody says to me, I just poured the footings for a project. is that going to qualify? That's an ongoing question right now, because they say if it doesn't, then I might just park that one and start another one down the street where I have another one. And I don't think anyone wants half-started buildings in this time. So that's, these are the types of things that we just think it makes a lot of sense as a group of premiers that the federal government would work closely with us and not try to go around us, which it seems like they're trying to do in a lot of times.
Thank you, Premiers. That is all the time we have today for questions. I do apologize for the other outlets on the line that we did not have an opportunity to get to.
You'll see me in an hour. I'll be there.